nonprofits that actually have student debt, and it's a pledge of refusal that when we gather 1 million people, we're going to together collectively stop paying debt. There's a faculty pledge of support for all of people that are teaching and would like to. And you may actually fall into both categories. I know a teacher of mine who is a sort of not a recent graduate who is still paying off her debt while she's teaching me as I'm accruing mine. So anyhow, and then there's the supporters pledge for people who don't personally have debt themselves. That might be parents, that might be friends, that might be some of us lucky enough to go through school and not accumulate a huge amount of debt. But it would be great to have a conversation today about how you see us all moving forward together, building what is a national campaign of direct action, and just generally changing the conversation at large. So I'd be happy to open the floor to anybody who'd like to talk about ideas or wherever you want to go.
Should we say a little more about the forecast?
Sure, go ahead.
The first one is that we think that the federal government should cover the tuition at all 2- and 4-year public colleges in the country, and that alone would be the single largest factor in alleviating student debt going forward. In the latest estimate we have for that bill would be a little over $70 billion, which is a fairly small slice of the federal budget. And would, in effect, restore the spirit of something like the GI Bill, which provided a free public education for tens of millions of Americans and laid the basis for the golden age of American higher education in the post-war years. So that's the first principle. Would someone else like to explain the second one?
Well, the principle that all student loans should be interest-free is based on the idea that student loans are not consumer debt. It's not like buying a car, or I want a new flat-screen TV, or this is something that is about human dignity, it's about human progress, it's about improving your life, it's about learning, it's about knowledge. It's about something that's fundamentally human, and it shouldn't be a source of debt or profit. So we believe that even going forward, if there have to be student loans, they should be interest-free. Nobody should get rich off student debt. Anyone want to talk about private colleges should open their books?
The third part, we think private colleges should tell us where the money's going. You know, we've seen the cost of pretty much every institution rise, and it seems like every year tuition costs go up, and we want to know why. Where is all of that money going? How are you spending it? Because it doesn't seem to be on us.
Then the final principle has to do with all of sort of righting the general wrong that's been happening throughout the relationship that has existed in student debt now. So this is in the spirit of a jubilee, which is one corrective action to acknowledge what has been wrong and start fresh from a point where you set it right. And so that action would be writing off student debt that exists right now. And it's an enormously large idea as far as just saying we understand that what we've been involved in has been incorrect, and people have been paying into their student loans at such high rates of interest that they're never actually going to get out of this hole, or it'll take them a huge amount of time in their own lives and become a burden for them to be able to think about the regular things in life. I've been talking to people who say that they may not be able to have kids, not because this is a choice they don't feel they're making themselves, but their payments are so high that they can't afford to take on a child. And those kind of life decisions is what we'd like to separate from the predatory nature of debt collectors. Does anyone want to discuss any of those principles more? Yeah.
I have a question about, and this is a question that was proposed to me and I had difficulty answering it, so.
Yeah, great. This is a great place to flesh that stuff out.
Private colleges should open their books, and this is what the counter was to me. And I had difficulty, it's a private college. And that's their money. I mean, it's like, how could we force a private institution to reveal their books? And so what if they spend it on a yacht and not back on the infrastructure of the university or whatever it might be, that you might see as being positive. It is their money after all.
Well, I mean, one
Answer
reason,
that, right, yeah.
one reason is that they're getting federal loans. I mean, their students are being funded by the federal government. So I think already it's not as simple as there's a purely private enterprise that just is having a private contract with an organization and an individual. It's not that simple to begin with. It's already funded through the commons, through the public. Yeah.
And they're also tax-free nonprofit colleges are on tax-free status, so they're in a sense part of that.
Right. There, I think there's several different types of nonprofits, and I think that they're the type of nonprofit that doesn't have to open their books the way that other nonprofits do. Yeah. It's interesting.
All right, so one thing it makes me want to talk about is the difference between when the commons used to belong to the commoners, right? When things changed and all of a sudden private property became protected and existed, we started talking about being able to penalize someone who stole a goose from the commons, and never talked about those that actually stole the commons. And this idea of private property being protected and the money belonging to somebody who isn't the rest of us, I just don't agree. I think that we are benefiting every time somebody decides to go to school. Every time somebody says, I'd like to be whatever in this community, it's an investment in all of us. And the idea that a few people should then own that money and decide where that money is spent, I just think that's a poor system, that it's ours to begin with, and we shouldn't be really fooled by that. Welcome to everybody that's new. We had a chance to go around and say hello and why we're here. If you want to say hi, I'm Suzanne with this campaign. If you want to talk about what brought you into this room today, or your relationship to the campaign so far, that'd be great. Let's say hi.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Nice, so here you are.
Yeah. Oh, tell everyone who I am. I'm a student debtor, and I also teach in the community system, and I do freelance journalism, and I've been tracking the campaign, so looking forward to hearing an update. And I'm thinking about doing a bigger writing project about student debt, actually. So
That's a great idea.
yeah.
So I'm Arlene Geiger. I'm an economist, and I teach in the community system, and I still have outstanding student debt, and I'm going to end up collecting Social Security and paying my student debt off. And I think I'm not alone.
It's really not funny, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I really don't understand, you don't want to pay the student debt back, so if you don't pay it back, you get a terrible credit rating. You cannot own a home because you won't be able to get a loan from the bank because you have terrible debt. You won't be able to get credit cards to buy things. How do you manage moving forward daily with your life year from now, getting married, trying to have kids, where that debt from not paying your school loans threw you into this whole thing? So it's not as simple as saying, don't pay your debt, is it?
Well, there's a
don't
difference, I
understand.
think, between an individual having to face the decision on stopping to pay your debt, which many people are dealing with right now. I mean, there's a lot of people defaulted and facing default because they can't manage the burden. And what we're talking about, which is collective action. So we're not saying singularly stopping to pay your debt now. We're saying join with 1 million people, and then we'll see
Oh,
what
okay.
happens.
Can't you, don't they say, try to go to your financial agency and say, you know what, I only make so much, can I have $100 payment? Or
Okay, well, maybe there are people in the room that have had some of those conversations that can talk about
is that true?
Yeah, there's not, it's not some, well, I mean, the first thing is there are different kinds of student loans. You could have totally private student loans, you could have government guaranteed student loans that were done by private banks, or you could have now increasingly student loans that are guaranteed by the government and through the government. So, all those different things, and it depends which of them you are. But there are government legislated deferment possibilities that are slightly different from one category to the other, which you fall into. Where you could defer, if you're back in school, you could again, at least half time, you could defer without the interest getting capitalized. So that's the best way, right? Or you could be unemployed or working 20 hours or less, which counts as unemployed, and you get for 3 or 5 years, to have the payments deferred and the interest not capitalized. So you're not. There is a variety of that, but then there's only so long. Other than student deferments, there's a limit on the amount of years you could undertake any of those kinds of things. There's hardship deferments that you could get, but then your interest and principal just adds up. Then you're ballooning. So certain deferments have no bad consequences. Others have bad consequences. So, but it's not a matter of talking to your individual bank. It's like, rules.
Where you fall in.
Yeah.
Andrew, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're not doing in the campaign is setting ourselves up as sort of brokers for allowing people to renegotiate their loans and make adjustments or even make slight reforms in the programs that are available. This is it's a moral and a political campaign that is aimed at having the kind of impact that might lead to changing the entire funding system for higher education, which is increasingly immoral because it's based upon debt bondage. And if we think about the larger picture of how debt is used in a society like this, it's a form of social control. It's a form of population control, but also a form of social control that really radically forecloses people's life options. In addition, it shrinks people's political imaginations. And the one thing about Occupy, well, one of the many things about Occupy is that it's given permission for us to expand our political imagination in all sorts of ways, and given permission to imagine an entirely different system. And when it comes to education, if we can't do that with education, then we can't do that with anything. Because education is where we're supposed to use our mind. So we're really aiming a little higher in the moral hierarchy of principles than simply asking for a few adjustments, asking for a little forgiveness here and a little forgiveness there, which other student debt initiatives have been doing. Ours is just a little more radical in that regard.
I don't know, someone just came in. There's plenty of seats if you'd like to.
Come on in. We're the
on.
debtors convenience.
Okay, I was trying to.
Come on down.
It's up to you, wherever you want to be.
Thank you. I was wondering if $1 million is going to be enough. And do you know how many millions right now have student debt approximately in this country?
Surely do.
I don't.
Do you have figures?
5 million
That's 5 million in default.
in default.
In default.
Oh,
Okay,
so
so
not
that's just
total
the default.
student loans in
Oh.
this country.
That,
Well, we're approaching $1 trillion, that I know, as far as the value.
and consumer debt is 56 billion. So 56 billion
I
is.
should just
How
want a
many people
ballpark
have-
number of people.
It's probably the number of students. Pretty close to that.
So I would
Well,
say,
but it's also past students.
Can you repeat the number that's just the student debt?
well, we're approaching $1 trillion
Just student
of
debt.
student debt in this country, and if you're interested in getting just information about like the statistics and the numbers, our website has a lot of really useful information, and I would rather point you to good information than quote you bad information.
We really don't have a number of total student debtors in the country. That doesn't exist.
So we know 5 million are in default.
We know 5 million are in default, and we know that the average has gone up to each student is roughly at 21,000.
Well, actually, I guess that is a 9% default. If that's 5 million is 9%,
Yeah.
and multiply that by 10.
No, it's 9%
I
default
think-
last year.
But that's, and that
It's
doesn't
totally
include
different.
for-profit colleges. If you include for-profit colleges, 40% of student debtors are in default.
It's so interesting.
There's a whole bunch of different categories of schools.
It's sort of like 3-card Monty of
Yeah.
like how the information is given out to the public. It just reminds me of sort of like these like a boss fight tactic of like you're not even able to see how many we really are as a group because it's been pretty well camouflaged, and so we're trying
Shell
to do.
game.
It's a little
Yeah.
find the queen, you know.
That's right.
What I didn't realize, in answering just sort of from my personal experience about negotiating with debts, what I didn't realize, and I have from 2002, I graduated, I went back to school, it was my second time around, and I didn't realize that every time I had a medical deferment, because I had a brain hemorrhage and I was in the hospital, and then it took me a while to kind of get up to speed, you know, be shocked. And I was like, oh great, and they were like, well don't worry, you know, we'll just put you in deferment, that's no problem. And yes, thank you. And they were so accommodating. And oh, we'll send you that form. And they were very accommodating. And that changed my debt from basically $30,000 to $65,000 now because of that. So I don't think I'm an exceptional case. What they do is kind of very, it's all very, the customer service gives you advice in a very cheerful way when you call and you're trying to renegotiate your debt. And they don't tell you, they say, oh, you know, no problem, deferment. They don't tell you, and that will cost you. I also was advised by Sally Mae, customer service, to transfer my debt over to William Ford because William Ford will give you income contingent payments. What Sally Mae didn't tell me is that I was approaching the 20-year mark on my original debt. I was approaching 20 years,
no.
Thank you, because I'm only 14 years old now, and so just have to do the math. I went to school 2 times around, right? Fordham for political science, dropped out, lived my life, etc. So I was almost on my 20th year. I took that advice, which I believe is no accident that they gave me, and went and transferred it to William Ford, starting now at the ground zero, with that debt, and so I wouldn't be eligible. So I believe that the so-called advice that you get.
Sorry,
to
I'm not getting.
In other words,
She could have been done.
I could have been done. I was right at I was 1 year away from 20 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I was counseled by Sally Mae. They suggested, take this to William Ford, we will get income contingent. And then when they actually worked out the income contingency, it was the same payment that Sally Mae was asking for. So that's just one example of what you're talking about, the shell game. I don't believe it's accidental. I really don't.
I'm just going to comment just about Sally Mae in general.
Not a nice girl.
Well, you know, this is just some comments I have to make. You know, their statement says smart options. Well,
Yeah.
I don't quite agree with that because also on their statement, there's no limit on the amount of the interest rate that it can increase. Okay, compare that to consumer debt. Well, they're going to give you a maximum interest rate, but not on these student loans. So, you know, when we're talking about options, you know, I don't think that, you know, they're really, you know, truth in lending and disclosure, you know, to rely on them for information probably isn't the best place. But I also think that, you know, these private lenders, I know that I felt that they had a kind of, you know, I felt that I was held over a barrel because I had exhausted all the federal loans I could. You know, I kind of maxed out the line of credit on my condo. And, you know, when you've got someone in school and you've paid for 3/4 of the degree between debt and paying, well, what do you do then? What are your options? Really, what are your choices, you know? And you know, so they've really got you. And this is just, this student loan industry is just another part of this greedy corporate bank financial system that we have in this country that are really preying, you know, on our younger generation. Because, you know, like we said, we know that you really need a college education, but, you know, the economy has changed so much that I think the unemployment rate for 20 to 24-year-olds is now about 14%, which is higher than the average unemployment rate for everybody else. So, you know, that's really why this student debt campaign it's really a very important initiative. And, you know, the reason that we're looking for 1 million supporters, because this is something that just has to change. It's just a very predatory process. And, you know, anyone who's involved in it knows that, but the point is that, you know, we also have to get the word out to other people. You wanted to say something?
Well, you had said that you really need a college education, ... for a job. And so part of the fundamental problem is education is not for your education, not for your brain, but it's so that you can enter the workforce. And so it's in some ways, it's part of the, I think, animating principles of this campaign.
And it is, because we did talk about that, you know, we have, well, that's okay, you just came in. But we did talk about that education is a right, it's a basic human right. And it's not a commodity. And it is being treated that way in this student loan situation.
Sure. A couple of things, actually. One thing I think that is very interesting is where education does fit in the scheme of human rights. I mean, it's obviously up for debate, but I think it's a very interesting topic. Maybe we can generate more discussion about it. I mean, because there's first, second, third generation human rights. And I think it's not clear to people where it fits in exactly. And I get a lot of confused looks when they say, well, education is a human right. Some people who are involved in human rights discourse, they say, well, it's this thing, and then other people are just like, what does that even mean? But a question that I have is why, I mean, to me it's so volatile for all of these reasons. But I haven't seen it really explode throughout campuses and among the student population and the debtor community in the ways that I guess hearing about it initially thought it might. And I guess I was wondering why. Like what, I mean, and then what would be the ways to kind of grow it?
So that's an awesome segue because we only have so much time today, and so we are here to recruit you, right? We are here to say, welcome to the campaign. You have a new part-time job. So basically, nobody works full-time on this campaign, and most campaigns that try and get national volume have full-time staff people. We don't have that. We are all, you know, doing what we did before Occupy Wall Street happened and adding this to our lives, right? And obviously, as you can tell, this is something that affects an enormous amount of people, just, you know, people in this room who didn't even necessarily know they were going to talk about student debt today. So I would love to spend as much time as we have left talking about where we can build networks across campuses. If you are able to jump into this campaign and start talking with your colleagues, whether you just graduated and you still have connections with them, or are on a campus, or just graduated and still have connections to your campus, or have friends wherever, but absolutely, the work to build this into what absolutely should be a no-brainer, right? This should be a no-brainer. I pledge to stand with my cohort. And so that's what we should be talking about, I think, is...
Can I respond to what he said specifically?
Absolutely, yeah. Very good.
I think your point is really well taken, and a lot of the emails we get and a lot of the comments we get is like this: you have to pay your debts.
Yeah.
Right. The economic order that we're living in, the neoliberal order. The central tenet is you must pay your debt. But that does not apply to banks. It does not. Who just, thank you very much, were the recipients of an enormous bailout. And Bloomberg News just reported a week or so ago that they were the recipients of a $7.7 trillion loan that was secret. It was not approved by Congress, through which they made billions of dollars in profit. Okay, so the pillar that you must pay your debt does not apply to everyone. Okay, it applies to people who have no power to challenge that regime. Secondly, the idea of publicly funded higher education seems like crazy. It's not. It's happened in the United States before. The City University of New York was called the Free Academy when it was founded in 1847, and it was tuition free from 1847 until 1976. Tuition was imposed on the City University of New York as part of the 1970s New York fiscal crisis, okay? And that's when the neoliberal order kind of emerged. So the idea of public, and the University of California also had free tuition for a large part of the 20th century. This is not a crazy idea. It's not that it's never happened before. We just have stopped being able to think about it in these ways because of the times that we're living in and the way that we are even allowed to think about the topic.
Doesn't the state of Florida give free tuitions to their residents? Florida? Does anybody know that? If you live in Florida, isn't there
I don't know much
colleges?
about Florida.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like what you were just saying and what the way Hannah articulated before, I thought was really pretty insightful in a way that I never thought of, as how, like, you know, K through 12 is
Okay.
free,
And
but
negotiate
that was
price.
adequate back then. You know, now, like, K through 12 gets you a cup of coffee, you know,
Right.
35 cents maybe, or $1.50 at Starbucks. But yeah, I mean, like, thinking of it in that vein. I have one other question regarding the principles and the pledge relationship. And are the principles also demands? And is it that we see that there's a possibility that if those 4 principles are agreed upon by the powers, whatever, before the million, that the pledges are called off and we've won?
Well, I would say the first thing is we are Occupy Wall Street subcommittee of the working group, and these are not demands, but these are beliefs that we collectively have support for. It would be an amazing situation if we had the kind of support where we didn't have to strike collectively. If that happens, then hooray for us. But until that, let's sign a pledge.
Yeah, just a little aside. I started my undergraduate as a free tuition student at City, and spent the last year that I spent there working on trying to make sure that tuition wasn't imposed. So.
Well, it's wonderful that you're here today.
Yeah, but, well, in any case, lost the battle, evidently. But one place that might be, I think, real interesting for you all, or you all, but you all more, to do this is, I'm in the economics department at John Jay College. We have the remnants of an economics club. Maybe we could try to start, I mean, I could take care of John Jay, getting you down there, talking up a conference in the spring semester. But there's all the other campuses, and there's all the other economics departments and different student groups and whatnot. So it might be useful to, and not just get the economics student, small little thing, but try to reach out to the student clubs.
Yes.
And do a joint, as many student clubs together to sponsor it.
Get her name, get her information.
Well, we're going to actually today, for everybody who would like to stay in touch with us, we're going to, we'll ask for contact information, and we'll be happy to follow up. Absolutely.
Hold on to that, lady.
Yeah, so before you leave, make sure you
Because
give us
this
your
is,
info.
this will resonate with students. And, the whole thing, this relationship between demands and beliefs, the stronger, it carries more sort of moral suasion when it's beliefs. But if you have a campaign that's doing something concrete that's threatening, the demands are implicit. And, the more successful the belief campaign, the more likely the tangible legislation that may not go all that far, but may go pieces, incrementally, even if you don't directly, pay.
Exactly. Another world is possible, right?
You must
So-
speak at our teach-ins.
Yeah. Other comments?
I was just wondering, so one comment that I've heard that stuck with me in reaction to the proposal is that, or not the proposal, campaign, is like, well, I mean, is it very clear to people what happens to them when they default? Like, is there an educative element to the campaign such that it's very clear, like, obviously you're agreeing to do it with 1 million other people, it's going to have this great social impact, but it maybe feels like the fear is that there isn't really a clear idea of what happens personally to you vis-a-vis default.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I have, my dad is co-signed on my loans, which makes it very complicated, especially with bankruptcy and dealing with student loans, that as much as I'd like to take a political stance and default, I have to realize that I'm not the only one affected by that, and I can't do something that's going to, without the input of my father, impact him in a very negative way. So the default thing is, just like we were saying, there's different categories of loans and schools. There's like, I guess depending on the situation you're in, different options that you could consider. Like me, default would be tough.
Well, it wouldn't be just you.
Well, no, I know, but,
And I do think that you should talk to your father.
no,
And maybe
yeah.
he should sign the pledge too.
No, he's not. Well, I'm just saying that's complicated.
It
It's
is.
obviously something that we'll work out.
I don't really have, I think that's a great point, but you know what, like we were talking about how the government is kind of doing the shell game, you know, in a lot of ways, having a million people signed on is, it's a leverage, it's a bargaining chip. I don't think as a campaign are going to like put a green flag and say, okay, default right this second. I mean, I don't see that we're at that point yet anyway, but I'll tell you something, I'm the media monitor for the group. And since this group started, Wells Fargo started offering discounts on their student loans. The Department of Education met with Obama about reducing the cost of student loans. They are smelling the smoke. So I'm sorry, in some ways, and you might be, I don't know if my group will agree with me, in a lot of ways it's a PR campaign. It's like, come on, we have 1 million people strong to do something with. We may not tell them to do that. Maybe we'll tell them to go get a nice tea. We got 1 million people. We got 1 million people here that are galvanized. Maybe they'll all jump up and down at once. It's a leverage.
Well, I think what you're also getting at is that this campaign is about action, and so pledging to act when we're 1 million strong is one of the actions. We're building towards actions this spring that are going to tie into a huge national and possibly international days of action. Education is a huge piece of this. The teach-ins have been incredibly supportive, and we're planning a week-long thing with teach-ins around student debt in the spring. And
it's a very scary concept. 1 million people signing on to pledge is a scary concept politically.
as opposed to though facing the fear of individually in isolation at your computer receiving a threatening letter saying if you don't pay or else.
I have all of those.
Yeah, I know the idea is you create such a pressure that something has to be done, and I would think that inevitably as we move forward, the powers that be will quickly recognize that you have a group of students all facing a common issue. You're essentially handing them something to organize around, and I'm sure student debt will be something that will be addressed.
I think that what will end up happening is also people that we think of as the powers that be will realize that we are the powers that be.
The traditional powers.
And also, I also think that 1 million people signed on, it shows that this is a political choice to not pay the debt as opposed to, let's just say, the spin that, we're just a bunch of drifters not paying. It's a political, conscientious choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's also what comes to mind was the third world debt crisis in 1980 or so, where basically if you have enough debt, you become the powerful. I mean, because basically if you have a little bit of debt, you're powerless. If you have a lot of debt, the creditor is in trouble. And that's it.
That's it.
If we have 1 million people.
What's going on in Europe right now?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So I know we only have a few minutes. I would say we would love to collect your information. I don't know what time it is. If people are heading to another panel, it's just 3:31 now. But do you want to stay for a few minutes? Do you want to try and wrap it up? We have a few minutes. Should we take a temperature check?
Did you pass around signage?
We haven't done any of that stuff yet.
Okay.
So,
Can we make one out of this? Just put your contact information?
and if you are attached to a particular campus or a region, or I happen to be in New York for, spring break or winter break, and but really I live in Ohio, let us know that so that we can talk to you about organizing out there. Anybody else want to, while we have a few minutes?
I'd like to.
Not
So please.
exactly following, but so so I see this as people got tricked into wasting money that they don't have on something that's sort of useless because they don't quite see the utility in schooling. So is it like, does that? I sort of feel like people just shouldn't go to university.
Well, I think people choose sometimes not to go to university because they don't want to get involved in the debt crisis, right? But at the same time, I don't see education as a utility. I see it as a path towards scholarship.
Oh, I was saying
right?
school
So I think that's just like sort of the education has been commodified to think you're meant to think, I'm going to go get a business degree, for example, so then I can go into business. And that's how you end up losing places like English departments.
So, okay, so when I really say,
And I mean, probably
if you want to
agree,
learn
just
something,
saying it.
you should
Yeah.
not go to school. That's my view on it.
Well, you may want to check out things that are happening within Occupy, like Open Forums and the People's Library and Nomadic University.
Okay.
But other people would like to get a degree to be able to teach at the university level, or, would like to enter academia because they identify with that field of scholarship. And it just, I think that's the belief behind this, is that is a noble path. And if you choose to take it, you shouldn't be shackled by the banks for it.
I think also there is an important idea there that we do work with in the university group, that education is not schooling. But I think it's very interesting as a kind of, there's a premise in the zeitgeist that education is always a good thing. And that, well, schooling is a good thing, that education is schooling is a good thing, I will pay anything, anytime to get an education. And that's what fuels constant taking on of debt, right? The reason why it makes sense to take on the debt is because schooling is always a good thing. To trouble or problematize that premise is like an important, though I think peripheral to this campaign. It's an important idea, I would think, to get across that we don't really understand it collectively.
I think, much like Occupy is kind of opening the space for, like, kind of like you said, reawakening people's political imagination. This is cool because, much like the rest, like the population has sort of been apathetic for a while, and college students fit into that category too. It's definitely a very big potential place for kind of new political imagination to happen and new ideas. And like the cool thing about Occupy is, for the first time that I can remember ever in my life, there's some pretty radical things being said out loud that you just aren't used to hearing. And I think people will become more accepting of them as it's more than 3 months old, as the years go by. So
Your dad too?
Exactly.
Yeah. Working on that.
I think the idea of that refusal in particular is, it's up there alongside incest, as an ultimate taboo in this kind of society, because we live in an advanced consumer society that is entirely driven by people going into debt on a normative basis. And that's why the sanctity of contracts involving debt runs so deep, that it's absolutely indispensable to an advanced consumer society. And even people who accept that education is a public good, at least, not a utility, a public good, they will also say, well, education is also a private good. And I would say, yes, it is, for a lot of people, a private good. But not all private goods have to be treated like market commodities. And that's a big distinction. But as with any public good, in a neoliberal environment, there are predators who are trying to turn that public good into something that can be redistributed for private profit. And public education, we've seen this for the last 30 years happen, and it's time to turn that around. And it happens to be, student debt collective student debt just happens to be one of the points of leverage that we have to turn that conversation around. And I think that's why the campaign is being structured the way it is. That it's partly a PR campaign, it's partly a moral campaign, it's in part a lot of different things. The pledge is non-binding, incidentally. It's not that you sign on, you're legally bound to default. So there's actually very little risk involved. The risk has more to do, I think, and this is the reason why people are signing in droves, the risk has to do with violating this taboo in their minds. That it's something that is so sacrosanct in the society that we live in. We have to dig that out of our heads.
But let me just right to that. I'm also, this is me, I'm worried about applying for jobs or politics. I'm hoping to work for a Democrat or progressive in Congress, and I'd be worried something like that could be used against me.
How would it be used again?
Well, I don't know, is somebody, is there a way they could look at the list and check you
We're not
out?
sharing the list with the Democratic Party or the only people that would contact you because you signed it as us.
No, we actually agreed as a group that we would not pick any of the
Yeah.
names on the pledge, public page one.
If ever, as a collective, we're a group that's a collective, and so we reach consensus through the Occupy Wall Street direct democracy platforms, and processes. And so if ever we were to change that, we would ask your engagement. If we were to say, hey, what do you think? That would come to you. The same way if ever we decided to say, maybe we should think about actually pulling the plug now and defaulting. That would be something that we as a group, everyone who signs that pledge would be asked to contribute to, because without all of us being part of making that decision and then being comfortable moving forward, it can't happen.
I'm going to look at your website. I would suggest strongly putting forth the security of this.
You don't want to say you don't really have to. I mean, the point is that you're signing it
it won't get out without your permission.
Oh,
It says on the pledge, but I see what you're saying.
I agree.
It's just in today's society,
I agree. I agree with you. I totally agree.
there's so many ways to get information about people, and
Yeah.
there's so much about how Facebook is not really secure.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that we will not
Just-
sell your
Good
list.
point.
yeah,
That's
I
a
would
Privacy
just
issue.
Thank you.
get that out there. That would.
No, I agree with you.
I've experienced that as a reaction as well. People say like, I don't want that getting out that I.
It should
accept
be
that I'm-
completely confidential because it's a
I mean,
personal.
that's my
yeah.
personal hang up right now. I'm trying to get a government job, and
Does that address your concern?
well, I'm going to look at your website. and,
Okay, great.
I agree with you. I wouldn't be on this if it wasn't totally confidential. I don't like my name hacked. I wouldn't want my name hacked.
Well, you don't want it to limit your
Well, I'm already
prospects
out of
for
the
the
game in
future.
most things. I'm limited. That's okay. I'm a pigeon rescuer, so please. Really, I'm on the web. You can see me at City Hall giving press conferences for pigeons, so I'm out of the game. But I don't like my name hacked. I don't like my name hacked, and so I wouldn't have signed on if it wasn't confidential.
And I think that there are two sides of that. There's one about like the safety of the list itself. There's another thing about being public for the campaign, and I would encourage people to be public for the campaign.
Except for him.
You don't have to, but I'm saying I would encourage to, video testimony about your story and why you felt the need to pledge publicly on Facebook and on Twitter and other places that you can help to build those networks. That I'm happy that my name as someone who signed the pledge won't be sold to telemarketers for, I don't know.
Buy one, get one free.
Well, I'm not sure that they would like people who default.
It's true.
No, you're wrong. There are companies.
Student lending agencies
Yes.
love defaulters.
Yes.
It's where their most exorbitant profits come from.
No. Other kinds of
Yes.
defaults make a difference, because after you default for 7 years, you can't default again. But student loans, you can't discharge
Ever.
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 I know.
So you're not as attractive to these people who
No, but
sort
they're-
of bottom feed for people who for 7 years
They'll
can't
take
default.
whatever name.
No, there are companies. There are companies. I don't mean to interrupt you, but there are actually companies. I've been doing searches that there are companies that if you do certain keyword searches with student loan debt, you will get a company that looks like it's there to help you with your student loan debt.
Oh.
And what it is it is a bankruptcy lawyer company that tells you what you really need to do is declare bankruptcy on your other debts, because that's the reason why you're not able to pay your student loan. And you're thinking you can't pay your student loan, but you're just thinking wrong. You need to declare bankruptcy through their firm,
Yeah.
which will free you up to pay the same debt that you have. And there's a lot of companies doing that. And they call themselves things like credit help, student loan help, student help relief.
But so just to make it clear, we're not selling nor
Right.
sharing.
So they
But do encourage you to join the campaign and sign the pledge and be part of building this movement and being public about it. This
Or
is something
not.
to not be embarrassed about being part of. I think that when people are in debt and feeling threatened and afraid of how you're going to make your payment, there's a lot of shame that comes along with that, and that's very sad that that's connected to education. And I would like to see that separated. And so that's why I'm public for this campaign. Cool. Well, we have some stickers. If you want to take anything with you and find a place for them, we'd be glad to hand you something. There's leaflets, and if you want to stick around, we'd be very, very happy to talk about this with you and all day.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.